After publishing more than 500 videos on social media, I've learned what gear actually matters and what doesn't. This video isn't sponsored. This is not a Dream Desk setup video. I just want to share all of the tools and gear that I genuinely use on a regular basis that I've built up over the course of creating hundreds of videos to help you cut through the noise if you're trying to build your own YouTube setup as well. I'm going to walk you through my camera, mic, lighting, my editing setup, and even some little tools that just save me a lot of time. All right, so jumping straight into my camera and lens, this is one of the most asked about pieces of gear that I own. People are regularly asking me what camera I use, and I use a Sony ZV-E1, and I pair it with a Sony GM24mm f1.4 lens. And to me, this is pretty much my dream setup when it comes to a YouTuber or content creation camera, because the image quality you get from it, if you ask me, is amazing. It's literally the same sensor you get in a Sony FX3, so it's a cinema level sensor in a consumer body. And so to me, it's just a really good deal. I highly recommend it. And then about a year ago, I upgraded to my first G Master lens from Sony. Before that, I'd used much cheaper lenses, and I wasn't really convinced that upgrading to a more expensive lens would make that big of a difference. Honestly, the difference to me was huge. If you can afford a G Master lens, especially a prime, I highly recommend picking one up. But having said that, I really still loved my 16mm Sigma lens, which I used for pretty much the entire first 2.5 years of my YouTube channel. And so if I was studying again on a budget, I would definitely get a Sigma. All right, next up, let's talk about my audio setup and my mic. I've actually gone through quite a lot of different mics over the past few years, trying to find the one that I like the most. And this is the one that I've kept coming back to. This is a Rode Pod mic. This is just a plain XLR version. This is not the USB version. And I think the reason why I like it the most is, one, I really like the aesthetic. I think it looks good. And considering a podcasting mic pretty much has to be in shot, I'm happy with how this one looks. Second, it's really high quality. It feels super sturdy. And so I'm not worried about this breaking or anything like that. I think it's going to last me a very long time. And then third, I really love the audio quality. You get really great sound from this. And for me, it's kind of like recording in raw footage on a camera. So the audio you get directly out of this before adding any effects isn't that impressive. But once you add some EQ and adjust it to sound how you like, it can sound really incredible. So I've literally just created a preset that I'm able to apply to the pod mic audio anytime I use it, which means my workflow is now super smooth and streamlined. In terms of my audio interface, since this is XLR, I record into a Rodecaster Duo. And honestly, it's kind of overkill for my setup. I don't use half of the features that this thing has. I literally basically just use it as a glorified audio interface. But in my experience, the preamps are really clean, gives me a great quality recording, and then I just record that straight into GarageBand. Now, a lot of people have asked me how I EQ my audio, so leave me a comment if you do want to see that. I haven't actually made that video yet, but if I get enough interest, then that's a video I'll definitely create. All right, now moving on to my lighting. And honestly, out of all the different pieces of gear that I recommend to people, lighting is generally the first thing that I recommend people upgrade, because out of everything in your setup, even your camera, changing your lighting will make the biggest difference to your overall image quality. So my main key light, which is the main light that I use to light my face, is a Gion Molus G200. Now this light is relatively affordable, and in my experience, it's really solid. It gives me a really high quality light. It's bicolor, so I can use it for different scenarios. Not that that's really necessary, honestly. As long as you can get a light that does daylight temperature, you'll be fine. But this one also gets really bright, which is very handy for separating myself from the background. So I'm a really big fan of this light. I've got it paired with an Aperture Light Dome 2, and I've had this ever since I had my first Aperture light. I absolutely love this dome. It's been amazing. I plan to use it for the next several years at least, I'm sure. And again, if you're wanting to upgrade your setup, this pairing is the kind of thing that I'll definitely go for first. Get a good softbox and a good COB key light, and it will make a dramatic difference. A new addition to my lighting setup is this Falcam Move. Basically what this does is it lets you use a wireless remote control to actually move your entire light, including the softbox, around freely on the top of your C-stand. It's really handy to have, honestly. Definitely not a must-have. Like if you're just getting started, you don't need this. But if you have been making content for a while and you're a bit tired of manually having to move around your LED light, this can just make that whole process a lot easier. Next, let's just talk a bit about extra bits and pieces that I use to film more content and B-roll and that type of thing. So I've got two gimbals. I've got a DJI gimbal and then a Gimbal gimbal. I like both of them. They're slightly different, but they do a really solid job of helping me to get smooth shots when I'm wanting to film handheld. However, I've actually been using them a little bit less recently because I started using a Zeppin Micro 4 slider. Now, I've got a whole review on this coming, so let me know if you've got any questions, but I have started incorporating a lot more slider shots into my B-roll, which I'm really liking. In terms of tripods, I've got a K&F Concept heavy duty tripod that I use for the slider, and I've got some really old, kind of worn out tripods that I use for my camera. So you don't need anything fancy if you ask me in terms of tripods. Just something that's stable enough to hold your camera is really all you need. And then in terms of a B camera, which I use from time to time, especially for unboxing videos for a second angle, I still use my Sony a6600, which I think is still a genuinely good camera. And I just pair that with a kit lens, and that comes in really handy. I can film on S-Log3 on both of my cameras, so I can color grade to make sure that they match pretty well. And then I also do incorporate Insta360 camera footage from time to time in different videos. The main Insta360 camera that I tend to use these days is the Ace Pro 2, just because it gives me really high quality and fairly standard looking shots that I find quite versatile. So that's also definitely nice to have. And then last but not least, let's talk a little bit about my desk and my editing station. So I'm still using a MacBook Pro. I think it's a 2021 model. So it's an M1 Pro with 16 gigabytes of memory. So it's not like max spec out, but honestly, it's still doing a really solid job. I've got no real complaints. I would like to eventually upgrade, but I think it's still going to do me pretty well for at least the next year, which is nice. Of course, if you've seen any of my videos, you'll know I love using a Final Cut Pro. That's my editor of choice. I highly recommend it. I've got a whole bunch of free resources if you do also use Final Cut Pro, and they're all linked in the description. I connect my Mac to an LG ultra-wide monitor, which honestly is one of my favorite pieces of gear that I've ever bought. I bought it myself and I still absolutely love it. I've got a pair of headphones from Rode, which I really enjoy. I also love using a Stream Deck for shortcuts for all sorts of different things throughout my day. I've got a Newfie keyboard. That's the keyboard that I'm using currently. I'm really enjoying it. And then my desk and my chair are both from Omnidesk, and I'm still really enjoying them. I've had them probably for about 2.5 years now, maybe 3 years. Has it been that long? Dang. And then last but not least, I organize all of my footage pretty much on my NAS, and I've had this for about 6 months now. It's one of my favorite new additions to my entire YouTube video workflow. Again, definitely not necessary if you're just getting started, but when you've been creating content for several years and you've got terabytes of footage stored up, having a NAS is really handy because you can put all of your content on there, and I've just genuinely been really enjoying it. So there you go. You don't actually need all of this gear to get started. Believe me, I didn't. When I started, it was a very basic setup, but I have tried a lot of gear over the past few years, and everything that I've just gone through is stuff that I genuinely have stuck with, while other gear has come and gone. So I definitely stand by all of this stuff. If you want to check any of it out, I'll leave affiliate links down in the description. I do have discount codes for some of the items, and of course, using any of my links won't include any extra cost to you, but it will help to support my channel. Now, I do have a 2025 desk setup coming very soon, but in the meantime, feel free to check out my 2024 desk setup if you're wanting to see my entire setup a bit more broadly, at least how it was last year.